Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to unite discovery and delivery in holy matrimony. All right, I'll stop with the bad wedding analogy, but what we are here today to talk about is the relationship between discovery and delivery, and why there is such a significant imbalance. Why is discovery always the bridesmaid and never the bride? And how can we help discovery finally take that all-important walk down the aisle? So to start with, let's talk about a quick definition of discovery for the purposes of this talk. So discovery is the process of gathering information and evidence to support your decisions. So discovery could be user research, it could be market research, it could be an experiment, it could be a lean validation exercise. Regardless of what the format of that discovery is, if your team is gathering new information and then using that information to make better decisions about your product, you're doing product discovery. So it really comes down to learning. And of course, the way that organizations have learned over the years has evolved. According to BCG, we're actually entering what they call the third generation of learning organizations. So the first generation of learning organizations really focused on efficiency. So if you think about Ford, their Model T assembly line, their goal was to deliver as many cars as humanly possible in as short a time as humanly possible. And what that meant was that the majority of the learning that that organization did focused on continuous discovery. It focused on optimization. So the more cars they built, the more they learned about how to build cars, the better they got at building cars, and therefore the more efficient they became. Now, the second generation of learning organizations has come along quite a lot more recently. And the challenge that they face isn't a new one, it's innovation. But what's new about it is how fast they need to innovate in order to avoid disruption. And what's more, not only do they need to learn how to innovate, they need to do that in parallel to their current business model. You can no longer wait for your current business model to see out its natural lifespan. You've got to support the efficiency and optimization needs of your current business, and then in parallel, be learning, innovating, and disrupting. And so according to BCG, we're now entering the third generation of learning organizations. So what does that look like? Well, to start with, we have an explosion in data. So AI, big data, learning algorithms, Internet of Things, sensors, all the data, lots of data going on. And what that means is that businesses are able to access a really unprecedented amount of data and insight about their business, about their market, and about their users in almost real time. And then in addition to that, you've got customer experiences and customer expectations increasing. So they're being driven up constantly by really world-class experiences like Uber and Airbnb. And then lastly, you've got increasing competition entering the market. So you've got disruptive innovators, you've got new startups, you've got new technological advancements. And when you take all of these things together, what that means is that this third generation of learning organizations is really under a lot of pressure to learn at speed and to learn at scale. So what that means is that speed of learning, the rate at which a business can actually learn, is the new competitive advantage. It's no longer about optimization, it's no longer about continuous learning, it's no longer about efficiency, it is all about learning. And what that means is that it's all about discovery. Now, all of those people who are out on Zoom and all of you here today, we don't need to be told that discovery is important. We know that discovery is important. We've been fighting that war for many years. In fact, I did a talk a few years ago where I compared becoming a UX designer to joining a revolution, because it really felt like I was taking on a cause more than I was taking on a career. And so we know we've been fighting that war. And the good news is that we are actually beginning to win. So companies are valuing customer research. They are understanding the importance of experimentation and validation. And so finally, after all these years, we're actually starting to hear a very welcome word, which is yes. But the question that we're faced with now is how? Because, you see, there's a very significant imbalance in organizational capability and ways of working between delivery and discovery. So while we've been out fighting the good fight for discovery, delivery's been maturing. So organizations have been investing huge amounts of money in adopting Agile, in adopting the Spotify model, in implementing Jira, and hiring Scrum coaches. And what that means is that there is now an imbalance. And so how does that imbalance manifest itself? In my work with product teams over the years, I've noticed a few key symptoms that we tend to see. And the first is that discovery skills are held by key people inside the organization, as opposed to being an organization-wide skill that everybody has. In a talk called Beyond the UX Tipping Point that Jared Spool gave a few years back, he talked about the distinction between UX skills being embedded in a team versus being integrated into a business. And discovery faces some of the same challenges. So many of us will be in teams right now who have UX designers, who have CX designers, who have discovery practitioners inside that team, embedded in the team, and that's fantastic. What organizations haven't yet reached is a state where everybody inside that organization has the skills and the capability to do discovery. The second symptom that we see is siloing. So the imbalance between discovery and delivery means that it can be really difficult for discovery teams to fully integrate with their delivery counterparts. Some teams that try to do this end up in what we call feed the beast mode. So they're working just slightly ahead of the product team, they're beholden to the product roadmap, and they're not really being given the time and the space to do the kind of discovery they need to do in order to determine if you're actually building the right thing at all. And so because that is so difficult, what ends up happening is that discovery becomes siloed. It becomes separate, and it becomes project-based. So it happens at the beginning of a project, or it happens at the beginning of a major sprint or a major feature release, as opposed to happening continuously. And then lastly, the last challenge that people face is the fragmentation of discovery practices themselves. So while many organizations have invested in wide-scale Agile training, that means that you have an entire organization who are all implementing Agile in the same way. They're using the same terminologies and the same methodologies. When it comes to discovery, a lot of the training is still fairly ad hoc, and it's still fairly individual and self-driven. And what that means is that you have fantastic discovery practitioners from across the organization, but they're all implementing slightly different variations of the same methodology, or using slightly different terms to describe the same things. And that makes it really difficult to harness the collective value of those people's experience. It makes it hard to harness the collective value of the insights that they're generating. You know, Dan mentioned some of this in his talk yesterday, actually, with his example from The Princess Bride, if you keep using that word, and I don't think that word means what you think it means. If we don't have a universal language and a shared understanding across our discovery practice as an organization, it makes it really difficult for us to collaborate. So in order for businesses to really be able to learn at speed and at scale, we need to make some changes. So we need to move from a state where discovery is a siloed activity to one where it's integrated across the entire organization. We need to move from a state where capability is isolated inside individual roles to one where it's really considered a core capability for the whole organization. And we need to move from a place where our practices are fragmented to one where they are aligned and able to scale as our discovery practice grows. Oops, went a little bit too far there. So how are we going to achieve this? That's the big question. Should be easy, right? Like, there you go, there's your list, off you go. And the reality is it's not going to be that easy. I feel a little bit like David Attenborough at the end of A Life on Our Planet. Have you guys seen that documentary? He spends the whole documentary telling us about the awful impact that we're having on the world, which we are. And then at the end he says, all you need to do is reduce the global population, increase the global standard of living. Okay, cool. Thanks, David. Very practical. I'll get right on that. So I didn't want to do that with this talk, right? What I wanted to do was make sure that you had something actually practical that you could go out and implement. And the best way I thought of doing that would be to take you through a case study of a recent organisation that we worked with. So earlier this year, we were approached by a New Zealand telco with a really exciting vision for the future. And they knew that in order to be able to succeed, they would need to build discovery capability. Now, this organisation is a really good example of one that invested very heavily in Agile capability. So they really treated Agile capability as a core skill for their entire organisation. They also have, from a discovery perspective, a very strong team. So they've got fantastic CX, UX designers and researchers, all of whom bring a wealth of experience to the team. However, they do face some of the challenges that we've already talked about. So the fragmentation of discovery practices, the isolation of discovery activities. And so the challenge that they put forward to us was, how do we create an aligned and scaled Agile practice without slowing our team down? And this is something that many companies face as a challenge, is they may have the desire to adopt more sort of broad discovery practices, but they don't want to slam on the brakes in order to do that because they're already delivering at speed and they're like, yay, we're delivering. So the challenge that we face is, how do we make a significant impact without slowing the team down? And the way that we decided to do that was to try and leverage what was already there. So they already had really good Agile capability, Agile frameworks, and Agile tools. And so we thought, let's see if we can leverage those to scale their discovery capability. So the first thing that we needed to do there was to move from siloed discovery to integrated discovery. And in order to do that, we needed to improve the visibility of discovery across the organization. We needed to enable collaboration around discovery. And we really needed to make sure that discovery conversations were happening outside of those individual teams and really happening across the organization. And the best way, in my experience, to do this is to bring your discovery into your delivery backlog. So that's what we did. You see, the backlog is really the heart and soul of your Agile practice. It's where teams go to discuss and refine and collaborate and prioritize. And so it became really important to think about how discovery could exist within that backlog, because squirreling your discovery away in a separate backlog, or even worse, in a separate tool altogether, means that we're reinforcing organizational silos with siloed tools. Whereas if we can leverage Agile's tools, your Jira, your Confluence, those sorts of things, that allows us to start breaking down those silos by using the tools. Now, in order to actually capture discovery in a backlog, you need a framework for doing that. And this is a question that teams often have. Should discovery be in my backlog as a user story? Should it be in my backlog as a task? Should it be something else entirely? And many teams turn to tasks. So we've seen in our careers a lot of people putting in things like do the customer research, or execute the quant survey, or interview the participants, whatever the case may be. And while it's tempting to have your discovery in a backlog as a task, what it means is that it isn't subjected to the same level of rigor and conversation that a user story is. So in order to address that, we created two entirely new backlog items. So in addition to user stories, bugs, epics, and tasks, we created Experiment, which is designed to capture convergent discovery activity, and we created Research, which is designed to capture divergent discovery activity. And both of those backlog items came with their own definition of ready and their own definition of done, and templates to help the team actually capture the right level of information. And if any of you want those templates, please just reach out to me on Slack and I'll happily share them with you. And the benefit of this is that now you had a cross-functional team that was able to refine, prioritize, estimate discovery work in the same way that they were already doing for delivery work, and together. So what happened when we brought discovery into the delivery backlog? What was the result? Well, the first thing that happened is that you had the entire team, so your CX designers, your UX designers, product managers, product owners, product leads, engineers, testers, all having really great customer-centric discussions around the discovery work to be done. Previously to making these changes, those conversations amounted to, hey, CX team, you know what you need to do to get this task done right? And they'd go like, yeah, totally. And then they would just move on. And that meant that you didn't get that same shared understanding across the whole organization. Now, you had teams having really great discussions, building a clear understanding of why they were doing that discovery work, what were they hoping to learn, what decisions were going to be informed by the discovery work that they were doing. And I'll refer back to Dan's talk again, because he made a lot of really good points yesterday. That discovery backlog, combined discovery and delivery backlog, really became one of those boundary objects that Dan was talking about yesterday. It became a landmark that the team could collaborate around, that would create better conversations and lead to better questions and understanding. And so this whole process not only led to breaking down silos, it actually helped the team begin to adopt discovery terminology, adopt discovery mindsets, and really built curiosity that ultimately led to a growth in capability as well. So the next thing we really needed to look at was how do we address the fragmentation of the discovery practice itself? So they had already a very good team of UX and CX and discovery practitioners who were all doing really great work. And the challenge that they faced was reaching some consistency around how. How do we do our discovery as an organization, not as individual teams? Ruth mentioned this yesterday. We were seeing a lot of time being wasted and a lot of effort being wasted because the team was debating minor elements of how to implement a particular methodology or whether personas were a good idea or whatever the case may be. And we really wanted to unite them around a consistent practice. And so one of the first things we decided to do was create a playbook. And this playbook was really going to be a central resource of tools, methodologies, and approaches that the team could reach out to for particular sort of common scenarios that they were faced with. And we wanted to make that digitally accessible as well, and we wanted to make sure that it was easy to update and easy to kind of keep as a living document. And so again, we decided to leverage what was already there, and we built it in Confluence because the team had Confluence, it worked really well, and it was really accessible. Now, I'm sure that all of us here have worked in an organization where they have a playbook, right? And the playbook is printed out somewhere and it sits on a shelf and it gets dusty and it's out of date and nobody uses it and it becomes just this sort of very pointless exercise. And that was literally the last thing we wanted to do. And so along with the playbook, what we did was we created a product discovery group. And that was basically a group of people from the discovery practices around the organization who were in charge of reviewing that playbook, of adding new plays to it, and then also, and really importantly, working with the discovery practice to actually implement them, to teach them those practical skills of how do you actually apply this methodology to the challenge that you're currently facing. And so that product discovery group really became an opportunity for the discovery practice to co-create their own capability. Because in lieu of the business actually going out and spending enormous amounts of money in the same way that they did with Agile training, we thought we can empower these people to take control of their own capability building and to create a really organization-wide level of discovery skill. And what's more, that group became a really important forum for them to be able to actually engage with the wider organization. So they could pull in people from the legal team, they could pull in people from the privacy team, they could pull in stakeholders or other sort of product roles and really start to build a network of advocates that would allow that capability to grow across the organization. So if we revisit the change that we were trying to make, by bringing discovery into that Agile backlog, we were really able to start breaking down silos and integrating discovery practices into the wider organization. And creating a centralized playbook and a product discovery group to actually support that and grow it and scale it over time really helped with that sort of reduction in the fragmentation of discovery practices and creating a really consistent organization-wide approach. And then lastly, all of those activities led to the kinds of cross-organization conversations that meant that discovery capability began to grow organically. People began to adopt it and embrace it. So to summarize, speed of learning is the new competitive advantage. But the imbalance that we face between discovery and delivery organizational capability means that it's really difficult for organizations to actually learn at speed and at scale. But there is an opportunity for us to leverage the agile and delivery capability and skills that are already there and piggyback off that to grow the discovery capability across our organization. And so I'll end on a question. I really like that comment from Elizabeth yesterday about not giving you a foregone conclusion. My question to you is, what capability and frameworks already exist inside your organization, and how might you, I love a good how might we, how might you be able to leverage those tools, frameworks, and capabilities to grow your organization's discovery capability so that you can ultimately create organizations that learn faster, make better decisions, and thrive in an ever-changing future? Thanks.